It's been quite some time since I've talked about this car, so let's go ahead and talk about it. This is my 2006 CLS 55 AMG, and that's right, it's mine, not my dad's anymore, and I'm just going to tell you exactly what happened to the CLS. That being said, hello, welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you don't remember, about 2 years ago in 2022, we picked up this CLS 55 AMG. We actually picked it up for around $3,500, and it was really cheap because it was in pieces. The front bumper, rear bumper, bonnet, side skirts were just in pieces. On top of that, it had a plethora of electrical problems. This suspension strut right here was collapsed. And the best part of it all, the pulley, the supercharger pulley had exploded in the engine, which resulted in the car not going into boost. Although it does have a supercharger pulley in there, it doesn't go into boost. So there was something that was just profusely wrong with the car. When we got the car and brought it back to the shop, the first thing that we did was we put it up on a lift to look and see exactly what was wrong with it. The catalytic converter needed to be welded properly because it was using JB weld to hold it together. So we fixed that, and then we replaced the strut right here so it would stop leaking air. That kind of worked, kind of didn't. It's still slammed, but it holds air, which I don't know how else to describe it, but it does both. After we got done with that, it was time for us to start tackling the body of the car because the car actually ran and drove pretty much fine. It did have a couple of electrical problems, but we'll address that later. The body of the car was destroyed. And I told Dad, I was like, it's probably best and more affordable for us to just buy a parts car. And so he reluctantly agreed, and we bought a 2011 CLS 550 with the AMG Sports package. Now that came with AMG front and rear bumpers, side skirts, and the steering wheel inside was actually a 3-spoke steering wheel similar to the CLS 63 of that year. This was all fun and great and dandy, but there was one problem, and that's because that car literally looked like it sat under a tree for about the remaining decade of its life. So when we got the car, it was weathered severely, to say the least. It sat under a tree because there was a ton of leaves and everything in the windshield cowl, and it smelled like pee. But the worst part of it all was the car didn't run, and because it didn't run, it also didn't have a key. And because it didn't have a key, when the tow truck driver, which he dropped it off at 11 o'clock at night, when he dropped it off at 11 o'clock at night, he didn't drop it off in front of my dad's shop. He dropped it a whole football field away from my dad's shop, and there are speed humps and everything, so we had to tow it with a Ford Ranger, a couple of chains, and a floor jack back to my dad's shop. And when we finally got it in there, it reeked. The whole entire shop smelled horrible. So we started the process of disassembling that car immediately. Took the front and rear bumpers off, the hood off. I got the door handles out of that car because they were really nice. And then I also got the gear shifter off of that car, steering wheel off of that car, and the side mirrors off that car. Everything was updated for this generation, and it actually looks pretty nice. I also got the taillights off that car, but apparently you need a module to connect them to the older models, so I've never been able to figure that out, but I will get that in eventually. With all the replacement parts replaced on this car, we finally brought it back to the house where I began wrapping. And I had no idea how to wrap a car, and the material that I got was from Amazon. Dad wanted to wrap the car in China blue. I told him it's either China blue or British Racing Green. He picked China blue. So when we got the car, we got Amazon wrap in China blue, and I got a little help wrapping the car and began wrapping it. And it took what felt like 3 weeks in the middle of October to get this car wrapped. Basically, it was after Halloween by the time we finished, and the car just looked great in blue. I honestly loved it, but my problem was I was trying to have it have that modern AMG look where it just has black accents everywhere. It didn't look perfect, but it pulled it off somewhat nicely. When we finished wrapping the car, I brought the car back to the shop where Dad and I painted a lot of components. We painted the wheels, calipers, supercharger, surge tanks, valve covers. The calipers, surge tanks, and valve covers we painted burnt copper from VHT, and the supercharger we painted a different kind of silver from some can that I got. I don't know if it's Rust-Oleum or what, but we used that to paint supercharger. The wheels I plasti dipped black, and then I spray painted the wheels with a layer of clear coat on top of the plasti dip, which I will later regret. And with that, the car was done. We tried to assemble it, and we did the best we could. But the night that we were trying to assemble it, there was a car meet that my buddy was hosting. I was supposed to attend the car meet. I never got to, simply because when we had the car done and ready, it was like, well, first of all, it was way too late to even make it to the car meet. Second of all, the coolant hose exploded, causing a huge mess everywhere. So it was probably a sign from God, like, hey, don't go. It's not worth it or anything like that. But truth be told, I haven't had any issues with this car. It's basically been running pretty straight ever since we finished it. The only problem was that it wouldn't go into boost, and there was a couple of electrical problems. So I basically drove the car like that for a couple of months, and the reason why I stopped doing it is because those electrical problems got a little bit more finicky, and the supercharger wouldn't go into boost, so it wasn't really fun to drive. But it did go from point A to B, and I did have my fun with it. For a solid month I was driving it, and it was fun. But then I got to working on this car, and by the time I finished this car, it was fully souped up and it was running pretty good. That was the end of February of 2023 when this car was done, and I brought it home and I started driving this car a whole lot more. The only problem was the front bumper was literally unpainted, so the whole entire car was black. Front bumper wasn't painted, and I ended up wrapping it. I wrapped it this chalk, and when I wrapped it this chalk, I did that all by myself. All the stuff that I learned wrapping this car blue came into play when it came to wrapping this car, and I did this whole entire car in a week by myself without any help. It was difficult. It's not perfect. There are some parts that I ended up touching up earlier this year in 2023. You guys saw that. That was one of my most recent videos on this car, where I updated the front end, and honestly I really love the way this thing looks. I just got done taking off the fighter jet livery on it. Regardless, that's this car. Back to this car. So with the experience that I got off of this car, I basically was just in limbo. I really wasn't doing much with this. We did have the electrical problem. Apparently there's something in the alternator that has like these two little prongs that stick into it. We replaced that and it worked out perfectly. I think Alex from Legit Street Cars has a fantastic video showcasing exactly what was wrong with this car. That fixed our problem with the electrics, and ever since then this car has been running pretty nicely. However, the wrap was starting to weather horribly because this car sits outside and that car sits inside. This wrap that I had, this Amazon wrap, was weathering severely. There were parts over here on this quarter panel that were literally shrinking and showing the silver underneath it. It did not look good. There were parts bubbling in other places. The wrap was lifting up, and the way the help that I had when it came to wrapping this blue, the wrap job on the front and rear bumpers, like where the license plate sits and where the grill sits in the front, it lifted up because they wanted to do an overlay. I didn't know at the time you could just skip that, but the overlays literally ruined this car, and the blue just looked horrible. There was a tree back there that literally would sap all over it. So the wrap was gone. It was toast. It was not good. But then I got a DM from a very fantastic company, that being Ravoni Wraps. Now Ravoni Wraps sponsored this whole entire roll, and they are sponsoring this video. So I want to thank them for sending me this wrap, because when they sent me this wrap, it was like sometime in September, and they've been really patient with me since then. They sent me this wrap. I told them I was going to wrap this car. I never really had the chance because I had some life things come. I wasn't able to get to this car. But fortunately for me, Ravoni have been super patient with me, and they allowed me to take my time when it came to getting this project sorted. In between, when the wrap came and I began wrapping it, there were a couple things that we needed to sort out. First of all was the donor car. What were we going to do with the donor car? We ended up parting out all the stuff from the donor car and sending it off to the junkyard. All the extra parts that we got, such as the catalytic converters and the exhaust and all the other components, we sold that off, basically bringing that whole entire project car and making it pay itself off. The bumpers alone, if we were to buy them separately, would have costed us probably around $3,000. We saved over $3,000 just by getting the project car and selling it off slowly and putting all those parts on this car. So in total, this car, before I took the wrap off, costed a grand total of $9,000. And it was super fun doing this whole entire project, but the wrap was failing severely. So Ravoni, who have been super patient with me this whole entire time, were asking, hey, when are you going to start the project? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? And I was like, I'm going to start it soon. I just have some things happening. Towards Thanksgiving, I started planning this project, and at the time TikTok shop was starting to go crazy. I was getting a ton of people sending me products from TikTok Shop. So I set up a goal: have TikTok Shop send me whatever items that I'm gonna need to work on this car. And I mean tools. So I got floor jacks, standing jacks, impact guns, wrench sets, every single tool needed to take this car apart. I got it. And then on top of that, I also gave myself $1,000 budget to get whatever extra tools that I needed, such as a chest that you can sit on and roll around in from Harbor Freight, and paint materials, other materials needed for this project. I got all of that, and by December 15th, I started to unwrap the car. And when I started to unwrap the car, I realized that it was going to be a bit of a challenge to do so, simply because it was cold. I needed a heat gun. The wrap wasn't coming off as easily, and I needed help. I literally just needed help. Thankfully, my cousin came. He helped me out to unwrap the whole entire car, and in 2.5 days, we got the whole entire car unwrapped, and I began wrapping it immediately. With the tools that I got for free on TikTok and this material that was provided from Ravoni, I was able to wrap the car in 4 days. And honestly, I'm going to tell you one thing. This company, Ravoni Wrap, is the best material I've ever worked with. And I've worked with so many other materials. The Amazon material, that car is from Tech Wrap, the Inozatech and Avery, 3M. I've worked with all of these brands. For the price and the material and the quality, Ravoni is the best. This whole entire roll shipped would be $650, and I still have enough material to rewrap that bumper twice, and that's saying a lot. So for someone who's an amateur DIYer that wants to tackle a wrap, I highly recommend you go ahead and check out Ravoni. They have a ton of color options, like really good color options, and their material is super easy to work with. So I'll leave a link below for you guys to check them out. I also will be giving you guys a 10% off discount code. Just use code TO. That's linked in the bio. Ravoni.com. Guys, check them out because their wraps are actually really high quality. So in 4 days, I finished wrapping this car green. But that was only 4 days of me spending wrapping this car. I spent 2 days wrapping a majority of it, and then the other 2 days were spent each day wrapping one bumper and another bumper. The front and rear bumpers needed some work, so I basically sanded the whole entire rear bumper and front bumper, painted them. I also painted the wheels and all these extra aero kit pieces, such as the side skirts, rear diffuser, front splitter, and the trunk clip, which I don't have installed. I did all of that, and that basically added a whole entire week of extra time that I spent on this car. So by the time I finished this car, it was basically January, and the car looked absolutely stunning. It looked exactly the way it does right now, and that was January of 2024, this year that I'm making this video. This car, the wrap has basically held up so amazing. Like, this car sits outside. We took the tree down, thankfully, before I unwrapped the blue, but the car just sitting outside, it looks so good. I ceramic coated the wrap, and it has held up so nicely. In that time, when I finished wrapping the car, I did drive it down to SoCal for a car meet, and the car drove absolutely amazing. Since then, I've basically replaced the lenses on this car because they absolutely got wrecked by the sun. I don't know why the lenses looked so bad. I got some aftermarket lenses from eBay, and I installed that on this car, and they look absolutely amazing. On top of all of that, we did do a little bit more changes here and there as far as the engine goes. So there were a couple other stuff that we did replace, and we gave it a nice little tune-up and whatnot. Sometime around August, I want to say, I brought this car back to the shop because I saw a video from Tony D'Angelo's that he got an E55, and he basically welded his supercharger clutch and pulley together. So it basically made a clutchless pulley setup. So I did that on this car, and when I did that, the whole entire car woke up. This car now goes into boost. It sounds great. You get the supercharger whine when you rev the engine and when you go that high RPM. This car, right now, the way it sits, I couldn't be more happier with it. In addition to doing all of that, we also lowered the car, and it just helped make the whole entire car look that much better. And that's it for story time. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, ideas you want to just leave out there, please leave them in the comments below. If you guys do want to see more content of me working on a project car, be sure to subscribe because I will have more stuff coming very, very soon. And if you are curious and want to learn how to wrap a car, guys, I will have a video coming very soon on how to learn how to wrap a car in X amount of minutes. I don't know how long the video will be. That's why I said X, but yeah, I'll have a video on how to wrap a car. It's going to be a good video. You guys just keep subscribing. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And yeah, check out the socials below.